the most asked questions I get on YouTube or when talking to anybody about reel mowers is, Dwayne, which reel mower do you prefer, the Mclane or the Cal Trimmer? And in this comparison video today, hopefully you'll be able to decide which mower is best for you. All right, it wouldn't be your typical Dwayne's World video without the orbital spin around the reel mower. So what you guys are looking at in today's video, again, we'll be discussing and comparing the difference between the 20-inch 7-blade Mclane and the 20-inch 7-blade Cal Trimmer. So before we get into the video of the actual comparison between the Mclane and California Trimmer, I just wanted to highlight for everybody the areas that I chosen to focus on during this comparison video. There's going to be 5 areas that I'll be looking at. The first area I'm going to focus on has to do with the reel and bed knife and the differences between each of the two mowers. The second area that I'll be taking a look at has to do with the height cut adjustment and really the ease of use as it relates to that system. The third area that I wanted to focus on with this mower comparison is really at the back of the mower and basically the propulsion system that the manufacturer chose to go with as it relates to each of these mowers. In addition to the propulsion system, I've also wanted to take a good look at the tires that were chosen by the manufacturer and how they compare from one to the other. The fourth area that I wanted to also look at had to do with the maneuverability and the ease of use when you're actually mowing with these mowers. The fifth and last area that I felt was important to look at for this comparison had to do with the maintenance. Now, not the maintenance on the individual motors, but the maintenance on the actual mower. You may be wondering why I didn't choose to do other areas on these particular mowers, for example, like within the motors. The reason why I chose not to compare the Briggs and Stratton against the Honda motor is simply because of the fact that with the Mclane, you can purchase the Honda GX motor. And at the same time, you can purchase the Briggs and Stratton for the California Trimmer. So those motors, in essence, are interchangeable, and you ultimately can decide which motor you want. So it wasn't necessarily a need to compare one to the other since the option is available on both motors. Another area that I will not also be showing in this video has to do with the quality of cut. Now, you may believe that that is a very important aspect, and I'm not going to disagree. It is a very important aspect on how these mowers perform. However, if you look at some of my past videos, I think it will give you a really good idea on how the California Trimmer cuts versus the Mclane. So with that, let's get on to the comparison. A little bit of a closer look here at the reels and compare each of the two to one another. So one of the things I just want to point out that is probably the major difference between each of these reels is how you adjust the reel to bed knife. So on the Mclane uses these 2 1/2-inch bolts here, and by backing off of each of these bolts, you have a bracket here that secures the reel to the mower, and you're going to tap on this bracket either here or here to either lower or raise the bed knife and the clearance. And then you'll have the same exact thing on the opposite side of the mower. So let's take a look at the California Trimmer and see how that's different. On the California Trimmer, if you notice here, there are these bars at the top of the reel. And those bars, and I'll move in for a closer look here, if you notice it's flat on either side. That allows you to use a crescent wrench. And that crescent wrench will allow you to either tighten or loosen the clearance between the reel to bed knife. So either you're going clockwise or counterclockwise on each side of the reel. So when looking at the adjustment aspect of each of these mowers, I'd much prefer the California Trimmer's system over the Mclane, simply due to the fact that it's much more of a precise system that allows you to really be able to dial in that reel to bed knife clearance, which I think is fabulous and one of the great selling points of the California Trimmer. So next thing let's go ahead and move into the grass shield here. The grass shield, as you can notice, is very different on the Mclane as opposed to the California Trimmer. The Mclane's is much beefier, meaning there's a lot more metal that actually surrounds your reel. In addition to the metal, you have these fins, and not only the fins here, but you also have these side skirts, and the way these blades swoop up, grass is going to want to be shooting out this way. So what these fins do is help redirect it so it's actually landing closer to the center of the actual basket. When you come over here to the California Trimmer is a much more simpler design, and really there's not too much function to it. You pretty much just have the grass shield and it's just a flat piece of metal. This is where the Cal Trimmer has some opportunity there, where as the grass is coming off, it tends to fly more in an upward direction, not all of the grass is coming out through the front. So stepping back and kind of looking at the differences between the two grass shields, by far, the Mclane does a much better job than the California Trimmer. So let's take a closer look at comparing each of the bed knives between the Mclane and the California Trimmer. I have a couple of examples sitting in front of each of the mowers here. Now, please do not hold the condition of this bed knife against the Mclane. This is an older bed knife that I just had laying around from an older mower I had where I replaced it. This bed knife on the right side here for the California Trimmer is brand new. But it's not about the condition of the bed knife that I want to point out today. It's really about the difference between the two. So if you look at the Mclanes, the Mclane bed knife is a complete assembly, meaning the bracketry system that attaches to the bed knife is all welded in and is held together to the mower with 3 of these screws here, which are 1/2 inch that you'll also find on the side of the Mclane. The California Trimmer bed knife, although there is a bracketry system that attaches to this, allows you to be able to just remove the bed knife portion of that complete assembly. So in essence, almost as if this was 2 pieces, and this allows you to remove one of those 2 pieces. The way that this bed knife is secured to the California Trimmer is through these little screws here, and I'm going to try to zoom in for a closer shot here. All right, so if you look here, there's going to be a total of 8 of these flathead screws that are going to secure the bed knife to the bracketry system underneath the California Trimmer. So let me just kind of zoom out here. So when looking at each of these bed knife, which one would I prefer? I absolutely would prefer the California Trimmer bed knife. And the reason why isn't because of performance. The reason why is because of cost. When you look at the price of a California Trimmer bed knife compared to the Mclane bed knife, the California Trimmer is probably about 1/3 of the price. Again, I'd much rather spend $50 here versus $150 there. Now the bolts, it's up to you whether or not you want to replace them. I chose to just buy extra bolts in case any strip out, any get damaged. It was only about $10 for those bolts. So even when you add it all together, $60, how are you going to complain about that? And in fact, in some cases, you may choose to just replace your bed knife versus sharpening it, just simply because of the fact that, you know, for that cost, it sometimes makes more sense to replace than to actually service. As we're on the Mclane, you're probably going to end up servicing more times than not and not replacing just simply because of that cost. The last area I want to talk about as it relates to the reel is going to be the bearing system that it uses. On the California Trimmer, the bearings are meant to be serviced, meaning you have these Zerk fittings on either side of the reel here where you will use a grease gun to be able to fill up the grease to be able to lubricate those bearings. On the Mclane, it's a similar but different system, meaning the bearings are somewhat similar as far as size is concerned, but it's a closed system, so it does not require any maintenance. So when looking at the two, and what I would prefer the Mclane, just because of the simpler fact of not having to grease bearings, you know, every service interval, which could be about every month on average for when you need to go in and do that. Some people may prefer to grease their bearings just so they can see that they're being properly lubricated versus the enclosed system that you have here on the Mclane. The one advantage I do also think the Mclane has is they do include dust covers. So behind that piece of metal there, you'll find the bearing, and that's just simply a cover there. Helps keep that bearing in good shape when these bearings are battling the elements. So in that particular regard, I much rather prefer the Mclane mower over the California Trimmer if you're just strictly talking about the bearings. So kind of when stepping back here and kind of evaluating what we talked about, which reel would I prefer? I much prefer the California Trimmer. And it's for those examples that I talked about, where the adjustment to the reel to bed knife, the bed knife replacement is much simpler and much more cost effective than the one on the Mclane. On the Mclane, it is a much more finicky system, and the price of a new bed knife is going to be much higher than the one on the California Trimmer. Bearing system, I can go either way. The grass shield by far is much better on the Mclane, so if you're one that catches a lot of their clippings, that might be a very important selling point to you. But overall, in my opinion only, the California Trimmer wins by far as it relates to the reel. One thing I just wanted to quickly mention had to do with the height of cut adjustment. If you look on the Mclane, you have a bracket system that is attached to the front roller where you have notches, and there's 4 settings on that bracket in this particular configuration. On the California Trimmer, if you notice, there's a bar here that has all these other notches in it. So does that mean that the California Trimmer has a lot more adjustment points and height settings than the Mclane? Yes and no. It does in a sense where like you're able to easily move through these very quickly if you need to adjust from one to the other. The Mclane has just about as much flexibility as well. However, it requires you to be able to relocate some of the bracketry. So for example, I can maybe move this hole into here, which would change my settings. Cutouts here, here, and here. There's 3 of them. It's at the top setting now. So if I move it down 1, that's going to now correspond differently to this bracket here. So I would say overall that both mowers have the flexibility to cut to any height of cut that you really want to set. However, you're going to have to tinker around with the Mclane a little bit more than you will with the cow trimmer to find your exact setting that you like. So my vote, cow trimmer, and how you adjust the height of cut. I think it's a much simpler system. Okay, so here we are at the back of the California trimmer and the Mclane. So let's take a little bit of a closer look. I think one of the first things everyone's going to notice when I kind of zoom in here is the rear tires are definitely different on the Mclane versus the California trimmer. So probably the biggest difference you're going to notice between each of these rear rollers here is going to be the tread design. And the tread design, as you notice here on the Mclane versus looking at it on the California trimmer, is that the Mclane appears to have a much more aggressive tread. So what does that mean for you as an owner? Well, if you live in an area or you have a lawn that has hills or slopes on it, the Mclane is probably going to perform better than the California trimmer. And that's going to simply be because this will have a better ability to be able to bite into the ground versus the California trimmer. That you probably noticed right off the bat also is that the way that the rear tire drops and lifts on each of these mowers. If you look here, the cow trimmer uses a chain. On the Mclane, there's a bar system here. Both of them are adjustable. However, I would say the adjustability is much easier on the Mclane. On the Mclane, there is a bolt up here that basically allows you to secure this bracket in any one of numerous positions based on where you need that adjustment to be. So you have this bar here that will then lift, raise, or drop that rear tire. On the California trimmer, the adjustability is not as simple. There is no bolt up here up top that allows you to be able to kind of manipulate this bracket. So in order to get any adjustability, it would be through the chain, whether or not you add links, take links out. And cow trimmer also does sell an adjustment bracket here, but it is an extra accessory. So in this particular case, I'd much rather prefer the system that's used on the Mclane over the California trimmer, just simply because of the fact that everything's built into one system. Okay, so the other thing that I think is probably one of the biggest differences also between each of these mowers is the size of the rear tires. If you look at the tires on the cow trimmer, they're actually tapered and they're obviously much more narrow. As we're on the Mclane, it's much fatter and it's actually much more of a 90-degree tire as it relates to the sidewall profile. So which one's going to roll better? Mclane, by far, rolls better when you're moving the mower around from one place to the other. However, on the California trimmer, I would say for turning purposes, the turning radius tends to be easier, in my opinion, on the California trimmer. You also want to consider, as it relates to these rear tires, is the fact that the California trimmer does require maintenance. They have a Zerk system that's in the hub of the wheel here that you need to attach your grease gun to be able to provide grease for the bearings on the back of that. As we're on the Mclane, it does not. So which of those two tires do I prefer? The Mclane, by far. The rear roller, I can kind of go either way. In my application, I'm on a very flat ground, so it really doesn't matter. But if I'm somebody that has maybe more of a slope, I am going to definitely prefer the Mclane over the California trimmer. So when it comes to the tire setup and which propulsion system would I rather have if I were building a mower, by far, I would pick the Mclane over the California trimmer. One other thing I just want to point out on the California trimmer that's very different than the Mclane is this cable here. So the California trimmer uses a clutch system, which basically everything is driven through this cable here that applies pressure to the belt, engages your clutch, that basically turns your rear tire. On the Mclane uses this bar here that actually at the other end is attached to a pulley, and that pulley is going to apply pressure to the belt, which ultimately runs the chain, which then runs the rear tire and runs the reel. So of those two systems, which one do I prefer? By far, I prefer the Mclane. And it's really just because of the simplicity of the design and the fact that in the future, more than likely, there's going to be less failure points for me to have to inspect if my mower is not operating properly. With the simplicity of the design, where you only have the single pulley that drives the entire system, which is attached to this handle, it's going to make for a lot easier maintenance and or replacement if I ever need to. All right, and with that, let's move on to just some overall maintenance that the mowers require. Looking at the maintenance required for the California Trimmer, as I mentioned, you're going to have those Zerk fittings where you're going to have to apply grease to maintain your reel bearings and your wheel bearings. From a belt standpoint, both mowers use a belt, and it's much more visible, and I'll just show you here on the Mclane. You have your main drive belt there, but on the California Trimmer, you're going to have one that's basically underneath that cover as well. The belts themselves, although they're different sizes, I think on the Cal Trimmer it's like an 18-inch belt, on the Mclane it's 19.5 inches. The cost of each of those belts is very comparable. So it's not the one thing I'll mention though is that is the only thing that you'll have to worry about on the Mclane. Now, yes, there is chains, and the chains do have to be lubricated, but that's the case for both mowers. So underneath that chain guard there, you have a chain. Underneath that guard there, you have another chain. Underneath this guard here, you have a chain. Underneath that guard there, you have a chain. So every mower has a chain. So you're going to want to lube up your chains, and that's going to be no different on any one of the mowers. However, on the Mclane, outside of the chains, that is really going to be your main failure point that you need to replace as it relates to overall maintenance. On the Cal Trimmer, as I mentioned, you have the Zerk fittings, you have the belt, you have the clutch system. So there's a lot more things on there that's going to require possible maintenance in the future. So overall, by far, I absolutely picked the Mclane over the California Trimmer as it relates to maintenance, just because there's a lot less things to have to worry about here. Cost-wise, probably not too different. You know, like I mentioned, the belts are the same. Yeah, you got to buy a grease gun. Yeah, you have to buy grease. Yeah, you're going to have to buy chain lube for both. So, you know, there's going to be some cost there. I wouldn't say it's earth-shattering from the standpoint of like how when it comes to the replacement of the bed knives. But at the same time, yes, the cost will be higher here than here, which is why I picked the Mclane as it relates to maintenance. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about as it relates to this comparison between a Cal Trimmer and a Mclane is about maneuverability. And I think maneuverability first starts with the handlebars. Both mowers have a very similar design where it's this kind of pyramid or triangle shaped handlebar construction. However, that's pretty much where the similarities stop. The design of the Mclane versus the Cal Trimmer at the top here is different. If you look here on the California Trimmer, it's a T-shaped design, which is pretty much like a straight bar across. As we're on the Mclane, it's more of this V shape where your hands rest and be able to push the mower around. I absolutely, by far, picked the Mclane over the California Trimmer as it relates to comfort here. I feel like the handle position here, as you're pushing the mower, is much more natural than the one here on the California Trimmer. I would also say, even though it doesn't necessarily look like it from the video, the handlebars are higher on the Mclane than they are on the California Trimmer, by probably a good couple of inches. So if you're a taller guy, that's a very important fact. And you may want to consider using the Mclane over the California Trimmer just simply because it is higher. Now, that is why they do sell a expansion kit for the California Trimmer, because I think they recognize the fact that it is a little bit lower. To me, I'm about 5'11". It doesn't really bother me. I don't feel like I would need the expansion kit. But if I was 6'1", 6'2", I don't know, I'd probably be a little bit disappointed there, as where the Mclane is probably going to fit me fine if I'm over 6 foot. I think one of the things that's very important is how easy it is to transport the mower from one place to the other. So whether that be from the shed to the lawn, the backyard to the front yard, I think it's very important that a mower easily is able to do that, especially in a residential environment. I would say on the Mclane, it does feel lighter regardless of whether or not how much each of the mowers actually weighs. And I believe that's probably because of the handlebar construction. Being that it is longer, I think the leverage is easier when you're lifting the mower. And generally when I'm pushing from one area to another, I will be tilting the mower in this position that I'm doing here to be able to allow me to be able to move it from one area to the other. The California Trimmer does the same exact thing where I'm able to then, you know, be able to lift the front here and be able to move it. However, I feel just because of the handlebar construction, it just doesn't feel as stable. I feel like I have to work harder at trying to maintain that. Now, is it difficult? No. But at the same time, just, you know, being brutally honest, I just think that the Mclane does a better job in, you know, transporting from one area to another. Now, the other area that's important to think about when you're talking about maneuverability isn't just necessarily, you know, how easy it is to move from the shed to the lawn, but it's really about how well the mower actually turns. Now, kind of ironically, I would say that the California Trimmer does a better job at that. And I don't know if it's just because of the narrower tires or how the tires are tapered, and maybe that's why. I feel like the bearings on both the Mclane and the California Trimmer, are very good bearings and they roll very smooth. However, when it comes to going around a turn, such as when I'm mowing around the front of my lawn here, I feel like the California Trimmer just does a much better job at that. And that could be just because of those rear tires. I'm not going to say anything to do with the roller, because if you look here, the roller on both my machines are identical. I use the California groove roller on my Mclane. So again, that has nothing to do with how well it maneuvers up front. It has to do with how the mower is pushing on the back. Maybe it's also too, it could be related to the clutch system. Maybe it's a smoother system versus just strictly the chain drive system on the back here, where it's a lot more, it might feel more like there's a jerking as you're throttling on the actual, the clutch lever themselves. So that's maybe a factor too, as far as the speed in which you're going around a turn with the clutch system here on the California Trimmer. It's probably in much more accurate increments versus it being just through this lever here up front. So again, around turns, if you have a lot of turns in your on your particular lawn, California Trimmer definitely going to be the way to go. If you have more of a straighter lawn where you have less turns and maybe just corners at the end, the Mclane is probably what I would want to use on that particular lawn. So again, for curves, Cal Trimmer, the Mclane, anytime you're just mowing back and forth in a straight direction. California Trimmer versus Mclane. The question that everybody wants to know the answer to is, which one is better? Dwayne's World, which one do you like? Well, I like both. But let me kind of give you guys my answer and my honest opinion of which mower I prefer. Initially, I would say I would pick California Trimmer. And this is the reason why. I had an older Mclane before I had that Cal Trimmer that I kept having problems with. Motor problems, which I know is irrelevant in this video, but motor problems, the reel had issues, the Bedknife had issues, the drive system had issues, the tires needed to be replaced. So there are a lot of wear items that, and or other mechanical problems, where it just didn't make good sense for me to buy all those replacement parts, because at that price I could have bought a new mower. So when kind of shopping around and kind of thinking about different mowers that are out there, I started looking at California Trimmer. And one of the things that really caught my eye was I also not only looked at the mower, but I looked at replacement parts and like how much things would cost if I had to replace it. And I was surprised how much cheaper the parts were for replacement, like the reel, the Bedknife, which I thought maybe one day those things might have to be replaced, but I didn't want to have to buy a new mower. So I ultimately decided to buy Cal Trimmer. And I definitely think that that's the right choice, and I think that's a choice that a lot of people should make when choosing each of these mowers. Is the Cal Trimmer is probably the way to go. However, I would say that after I purchased that Cal Trimmer, there was always something that felt off. Felt like, there's something just missing with this mower that I got out of the Mclane. I don't know if it was maybe just because of the handlebar construction, or even maybe just the way the mower looked. I kind of look at each of those mowers just from a visual standpoint. I know that's not part of the comparison, but I kind of look at the Mclane as like the muscle car, and I look at the Cal Trimmer as kind of like the nice European car. So, when kind of thinking about it, there's going to be days I want to drive one or the other. So, ultimately, I decided to buy a Mclane again. And not this Mclane you see in the video, but a different Mclane, where it was a 10-blade even. And it cuts so nice. I had that mower set up so nice. I don't even know why I sold it, but thank God I went to a really good owner that was just starting out real mowing. He has an awesome mower now, because I know, all the things I did to get that mower, to the level it was. And, I just really felt like the Mclane was a mower that I just enjoyed using. Not that I don't enjoy using the Cal Trimmer, but it's like a funner mow. I don't know how to explain that or put that any differently. So that's why ultimately, I don't regret buying my new Mclane either. So that's kind of like where we kind of lead up to today. Okay, well, ultimately, which one do you choose? I chose both. And I think from this video, you can look at both options, and I don't think you'll go wrong with either one. Initially, again, I say initially, I thought Cal Trimmer was the way to go. And I would have no regrets if I just had the Cal Trimmer and no Mclane. But again, there's something about that Mclane that really I enjoy using, that I think a lot of people would probably enjoy using themselves as well. So again, the ultimate decision is going to be up to you, and you're going to have to be the one to decide. I'm not going to take necessarily my word for it. Take the information and then decide what you feel is best for your individual application. And with that, the one thing we all need to agree on is be excellent and party on.